Would you please stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight on this pleasant end of summer evening. The first item on our agenda would be our weekly commission reports. Commissioner Pennell.
I have no report, but I did want to remind everyone that school will be starting, so be careful with the little kids out there on the sidewalks walking and waiting for the bus. So watch out for them. That's my report.
Mr. Olson.
Tomorrow I'm going to attend I think it's tomorrow, the public hearing for the Shelton Hills Environmental Impact Statement. I'm going to attend that. Thursday I have a community lifeline. And then Saturday I've been invited to participate with the Skookum Rotary on the first Adopt a Street cleanup. So we'll see how that goes, if it's still on or not.
Okay.
And that's my report.
All right. I have no scheduled meetings this week. I believe that we mentioned that last week we did meet with the Department of Agriculture and talk to them, and we had a good conversation, and we are continuing to do our reaching out for some grant money to help the city and the citizens able to pay some of these obligations that we have. So we are looking for grant money. If anybody here would like to write as a grant, that means we don't have to pay it back. We'd be more than happy to come and talk to you too, but anyway, we're looking for that. The next item is the consent agenda. Have my fellow commissioners had time to review the material in the consent agenda, and are you ready for the reading?
Good. General public comment.
Oh, general public comment. That's right. Don't forget that. Sometimes I do, and then we get reminded. Oh, lots of people. All right. So we have lots of people to speak for the general public comment period. You each get 3 minutes each, and the first is Kathy McDowell.
Hello, Mayor Krantz and Commissioner Pennell and Olson. I want to make some compliments to the city. First, I want to comment on all the roads and streets that are being paved, and it's very exciting to see all the sidewalks, and I haven't seen this much going on for a long time, so it's really exciting, especially to the people that are very concerned about our streets and our sidewalks being done. They're excited. The second, I'm going to ask if there is any possible way to look at the streets that have been dirt for years and have them a possibility of eventually getting them at least chip sealed. We have people living on roads that are just a mess in the winter and a mess in the summer, and they're really discouraged. And so I'm just encouraging everyone to look at that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Justin Cowling. Usually he comes up to present a report or something, so I don't know what he's going to do tonight.
This is about the historic preservation, our signs. We're trying to figure out a compromise of what we can do. So I have a letter from the board that I hope, then we're not looking for an answer today, but something to think over and hopefully soon so we can get this project underway and completed. Honorable Mayor, City Commissioners, there's, as you may recall, a discussion about historic district signage within the City of Shelton. Historic District started approximately 7 years ago. Since that time, designs have been completed with the assistance from the City of Shelton Public Works. Locations have been determined and the budget has been finalized for the historic district signs on Railroad and the Railroad Avenue entryway sign. The City of Shelton's Historic Preservation Board does not feel it is appropriate to solicit money for the City of Shelton historic signs and the entryway sign without first being granted approval. We have been informed that approval of the project is contingent upon having necessary funds before commencing the project. This source of funding is donations from private citizens, businesses, civic organizations, local nonprofits. The Shelton Historic Preservation Board does not believe it is appropriate to seek donations for a city project that is not yet being approved. City concerns about funding for the project are understandable. To alleviate the concerns, Shelton Historic Preservation Board believes the Commissioners could grant approval that gives us a window to secure the funds needed. We believe that 180 days is an adequate working window to complete the project. If funds are not collected, then it would be up to the Historic Preservation Board to come back to the city and ask for an extension. Shelton Historic Preservation Board consists of volunteer members and as such doesn't have the same depth of authority that a city official does. If door-to-door canvassing is indeed needed, it should be accomplished by the city officials having authority in decision-making process. However, we feel a historic district mailing would be more effective for three reasons. The first is information would be under the City of Shelton letterhead, which is governing body and has a final say in the decision-making. Secondly, the information about the project is consistent, which door-to-door could not hope to fulfill. Lastly is the economy of scale. Mailings are much faster than door-to-door, plus everyone gets the same message. Door-to-door might require return visits to make sure that all interested parties receive the information. City of Shelton Historic Preservation Board volunteers are willing to inform district residents, owners, and businesses by mailing that they are in a district and provide details of the project that has been approved by the Commission. We realized there was some confusion with a newspaper article that had erroneous information that caused public concerns. However, recent newspaper articles have revisited the issue and corrected previous errors. Therefore, a mailing should put all fears to rest. If there are any concerns or questions with the mailer, people will be informed to contact Justin Cowling, the board chair. It is our hope this will eliminate all concerns the Commission may have about the project, and it can be signed off and completed in a reasonable time frame. Thank you from the Historic Preservation Board. We also have a sample of the mailer. This is just a rough draft of quick, easy, so we can discuss that. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. All right, very good. And next is Forrest Cooper.
Thank you so much, Commissioners. I'm Forrest Cooper, 409 West Railroad. I'm also a member of the Shelton Historic Preservation Board, and I just wanted to add a couple of further notes to what Justin was just explaining about the sign project. I wanted to inform you that the facility that I have arranged to actually construct the signs in will be unavailable after October. Therefore, time is of the essence. So I am formally requesting approval with conditions, the conditions being that we will send out the mailer to all the residents of the districts. I'm hoping to have that within 2 weeks. If we don't receive approval in 2 weeks from today, if it's not granted, as I am the primary contributor to the construction of the project, the offer for these signs will be retracted and there will be no further opportunity for them to be presented to the city further on. So I highly suggest let's move it along, as this is entirely donated, and once again, none of the money comes from the taxpayers or the City of Shelton. It's all donated from private funding, civic organizations, and local contributors, as myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Tom Davis has signed in.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Tom Davis, 170 West Bushy Road. Who would have thought that poverty was going to be the hot ticket in Mason County? But that's exactly what's happened, and more or less it started right here, and I want to express my appreciation for that. Over 600 people came to see and listen to and empathize with Donna Beagle, Dr. Donna Beagle. Over the course of 3 days, there were several seminars. I went to 3. That was one too many, but it was a long time, and it was very, very interesting and inspired a lot of conversation. Now, I didn't even agree with everything that was being said, but that really doesn't make any difference. What does make a difference is everywhere I go, in the newspaper, on the radio, talking to people, everybody's talking about the condition of poverty, and that has happened almost overnight, and it's been a wonderful experience. And And I don't speak for the poverty task force at all, but at the same time, we're tackling the problems. There's a lot of information coming in, and it's very inspiring to be in a position to be instrumental in some policies that might come down the road. So I thank you for your participation, for taking the initiative, and we'll live up to that hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. And again, I'm very sorry I missed this general public comment. My eyes are getting a little blurry, and I glance down here on my agenda, and sometimes I miss those things. But I'm glad everyone had an opportunity to speak. And I personally will be talking to our city administrator later this week or first part of next week about the things you've talked about. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Okay, now, are we ready to read the consent agenda? It appears that we are. Could we please have a reading of the consent agenda?
Consent agenda, item number 1, vouchers numbered 81673 through 81752 in the amount of $362,000, $16.98. Item number 2, manual warrant number 81565 in the amount of $493.25 to Department of Revenue. Item number 3, transfers and direct banking fees in the amount of $10,753.06. Item number 4, interlocal agreement with Mason County equipment sharing.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The agenda passes. Under old business, we have a subject which we are fairly familiar with, and that's the Canyon Creek Overflow Conveyance Project. And this is the final acceptance, I believe, and it's going to be presented to us by our city engineer, Mike Michael.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Actually, with some of the previous discussions, this actually became a little bit of an oversight because previous discussions were normally what we talk about here. So we caught this about a week ago, and so we're processing this final document. Again, a lot of the information in the briefing report we discussed several weeks ago when a question came up on this. This project was an expedited project to facilitate coordination with the state's paver project, and so it was designed, bid, built very fast, and the built very fast was a big piece of this. Our contractor actually did it about half the time we expected them to. So on May 29th of this year, we gave notice to proceed to Roglins. Prior to that, on the 20th, Commission awarded to Roglins after staff had to deem the original low bidder, Pavetta Brothers, non-responsive due to some missing contract documentation, or some bid documentation, actually. The bid amount awarded on was $365,000, and the final price of the project, I don't have it on here, was $478,483.37. The primary cause of the increase was related to some coordination issues that were not able to happen with the paver project. We went into this assuming a fairly short turnaround between the finish of ours and the beginning of theirs, and so designed the restoration accordingly. Unfortunately, as their project got pushed out and delayed, we got to a point where, for safety reasons, we needed to modify our pavement restoration and had to install an additional approximately 300 tons of asphalt for nearly $50,000 worth of the increase. The other big component of it was some stormwater issues that were related to, one, a utility conflict, as well as the addition of Pine Street between Front and First to the paver project, and some need for some stormwater work there. Again, the project was done well within the time frame. We originally gave the contractor 45 days. They were substantially complete in, I believe it was 27, and physically complete in 33 working days. And we did this all in one, progress payments, which led to some of the questions previously. So at this time, everything's been done, completed. The contractor has turned in all their documentation, and staff is requesting that the commission approve final acceptance of this project with Roglins, Inc., and by placing this action on the consent agenda for next Monday.
Comments, questions?
Just a clarification, Mike, there is money in the stormwater account to cover this?
Yes, there is.
I guess just a comment that, now Roglins is going to do Fairmont also, right?
That's correct.
So at least we know that they can work fast when they need to, and hopefully it won't cost any more, but we know they'll do a good job.
They will do a good job, and they're already committing to us to meet or exceed our
Just
schedule.
tell them the state's right behind them.
There you go.
Well, I'm excited because Canyon Creek was a subject that I heard 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, and a couple years ago I kind of got involved personally with it, and we as a commission made a commitment to that area, and hopefully that with the completion of this work that's been done, that will be a much better area henceforth. So anyway, I am looking forward to accepting this and moving forward. But on a technical note, do we need a motion at this time? I see final acceptance at
No,
this time. I can
consent.
give you my final acceptance, but
Unless the commission would prefer to act this evening and be done with it. Always your decision.
well, you're looking for us to accept it at this time, so I'm open to do that.
If you're happy with it, you're welcome to do that. I mean, it's your call. He's scheduled for the 9th, but they'd be glad to not come back another week.
Well, it looks good to me, so it's kind of up to my fellow commissioners if they want to entertain a motion at this time.
I will make a motion that the commission approve final acceptance of the Canyon Creek Overflow Conveyance Project to Roglins Incorporated in the amount of $478,483.37.
Second that.
There's a motion and a second, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Shelton Historic Preservation Board is again reappointing a member that we reappointed named Tristan Starr. And so we are going to be talked to about that by, I believe, a representative from that group. But it's not on my notes exactly who that would be.
Evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. The conflict came in was with the briefing that I had at the last meeting, and the question was brought up by Commissioner Parnell in regards to the end date of 2014. Now, as I found out, and I did a little bit of research, there was a little bit of a conflict going on, and I want to kind of start at the very start. All my board members of the Historic Preservation Board serve a 3-year term. And a 3-year term is, of course, brought in before the mayor and the city commissioners, being you. And it's decided upon and then finally given approval. At this time, when Tristan Starr came in 2010, she actually came in November. There was a little bit of controversy here and stuff because she actually didn't get approved by the commission until 2011, excuse me. And it was because of the Christmas holidays, the stuff that was on the agenda at that time and so forth. So things kind of got delayed. So, and on my briefing that I had for Tristan Starr, I had her ending 2013 also. So, I mean, I looked at it as being 11, 12, 13. As I was pointed out by the other side of the city, that she actually came in 2010, and you have to look at it from 2010, 11, 12. And I argued my case, and I think I lost. So I was told to write up a briefing and put the briefing so that she would end, her term would end submitting a letter at the end of 2014, which would be basically 2015, and counting backwards, it would meet the 2012. So I'm in a little bit of a quandary here. I mean, I could go with her 2014, 15, or 16 here. And if I do this
We have a
2013...
clarification, I think. We have a clarification over here.
Yes.
I looked up some information as
Okay.
well, Eric.
Okay.
So what we did is we had her starting in 2010. So she served all of 11, all of 12, all of 10, 11, and 12. And we would appoint her effective January 1st, 2013, which I'm sure she's been active for the last few
Right.
months. So we would ask that a 3-year term ending December 31st, 2015 be voted on and approved. Okay?
Okay, I could go with that.
You too?
I could go with that.
Okay.
We're all on the same page.
Let's
So
just do
I will
that.
change my briefing to reflect the 2015 and get it corrected on the paperwork.
Yeah, all of 13, 14, and 15.
Okay.
Well,
That's it.
I think it's all just wonderful. I think she's a great addition, and, sometimes this adds a personal note to our city meetings sometimes to have conversations like this. So I think she's fine to be there as long as she wants to be there. So I don't
Thank you
know
very much.
what my fellow commissioners feel. I think we're fine with the the change to dates, because
So,
we've already okayed her once. I
so do you
think.
want to place it on the consent agenda for next meeting and do it that way?
Why don't we just
And
do it, like, a motion?
Okay.
I mean,
I would move that we appoint Tristan Starr to the Shelton Historic Preservation Board's term to end December 31st, 2015,
Okay.
or a lifetime appointment,
Lifetime.
and not have to do this again.
Thank you.
have to strike that from the record.
Right, yes,
So
I understand.
We're going with the first part of that.
Okay.
I'll second the first part.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Job well done. Thank you, Tristan. All right, last item under old business is, I believe, presented to us by Mr. Steve Goins, and it's an update on the moratorium on collective gardens.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. I will try to be as brief as possible tonight. This provides a basic platform for a discussion on direction for how to proceed. I wanted to give you some background information, a lay of the land, and describe what we're trying to accomplish, and I think these slides help us do that, just in, again, a means of background. Initiative 692 established the ability to provide medical cannabis in the state of Washington. In summary, that went pretty well until about 4 or 5 years ago. There began to be a proliferation of different activities that were getting harder to regulate. And as you can see, Senate Bill 5073 was passed by the legislature in 2011. That was largely vetoed by the governor, but a portion of that was retained established the regulations for providing for collective gardens. That is medical marijuana that can be grown in specific quantities, and a number of provisions were associated with that. On the heels of that, the city passed a moratorium until we could better understand these regulations and try to establish some zoning regulations to allow this type of use. Subsequent to that, however, Initiative 502 was passed, and this was obviously some correlation between these two activities. This established the ability to provide recreational marijuana statewide. tasking the state with coming up with the regulations to license these different types of activities, which is still underway. The State Liquor Board is expecting to come out with some requirements soon. In fact, I believe that's in November. So we're trying to move along, and we have these two tracks that we're pursuing. One is to understand how to regulate collective gardens, if we choose to do that, and how to identify how the provisions for recreational marijuana would apply in Shelton. Then that explains pretty much what I just described. We were hoping that the feds or the state would provide some clarity. In fact, the legislature went into session contemplating some changes to the requirements of the initiative and didn't do that. One of those was the provision to provide separation between certain activities and these different either retail, distribution, or production activities, such as distances from schools or preschools, those types of things. In the meantime, our current moratorium is set to expire on September 11th. So I wanted to come before you and discuss what our options are, and have a broader discussion with the community as well. As you're likely aware, we've discussed this a number of times in the past. Our state laws are almost certainly preempted by federal law. There's been a lot of back and forth at a federal level on how the feds would look at what the state is doing. They've been a little bit all over the map in terms of where the needle's pointing, whether they are going to be a cooperative or non-cooperative, if you will. And no one can really predict just how that's going to play out. But the ability to provide this as a defense is part of the what the statute provides. We're not sure whether the current legislative session is going to add or change this at all. We'd be speculating to tell you that may change. What we can tell you is if the legislature does decide to amend the provisions of the initiative, we would have the ability then to amend whatever provisions we need to accordingly. But at this time, we're not sure how that will go. The provisions do address a number of licensing issues regarding recreational marijuana use. For example, the stores or the places where it's produced or distributed, you shouldn't be able to identify those from the outside. Partaking the product inside is prohibited. There's a lot of training that goes into the clerks and others that are part of the operation, but all of those provisions haven't been provided to local or county municipalities as of yet, so we're not exactly sure what that's going to say, but most of those provisions are stated that they will be addressed through the initiative. Regarding collective gardens, there's some different ways we could approach this. A lot of cities and counties are taking different tacks on this. Mason County, as well as some other jurisdictions, have considered allowing them in commercially zoned areas, treating them as a commercial entity with other particular provisions. In Mason County's case, there was a number of safety issues that they associated with that business that were a requirement that they wanted to include in their provisions. Other cities have chose to allow them in residential areas. The thought behind this was the collective gardens were intended to be a small-scale endeavor involving a handful of people. A very small number of plants were intended to be grown, and the thought was that it was more geared toward a small setting, such as one room of your house, not to take up a bunch of space or be a big production. In fact, that's a concern that as the rules were written, it didn't seem to be clear how you could prohibit someone from turning a collective garden into a large-scale operation. One way to do that would be to regulate those in a house, and you've sort of capped the area that this can be in. So some jurisdictions have taken that approach. Some of the things that are missing in the regulations that I think we need to be cognizant of are the number of collective gardens a patient can be a member of. If a member's a member of a garden on 3rd Street, are they also a member of the garden that's over here and providing an impetus for more of these gardens, or for how long? That's absent from the regulations. Again, there's been some concern that without some sort of way of monitoring or regulating this, that they would begin to operate like a business, which wasn't the intent. Regarding the recreational marijuana, what the state is coming out with in terms of regulations is how to deal with this, and there's really 3 primary functions that they're addressing. There's the producers, which has a lot of the feel of an agricultural business, the processing or distribution, which might look or feel a lot like a food handling operation or a retail type of business, and specifically the retail and how that's looked at is perhaps similar to how you would regulate a liquor store or a pharmaceutical store, same type of arrangement. Whether private clubs would be allowed and how that's dealt with may become something more at a local level, and I'm anticipating they will be limiting the size of these operations as well. And the number of them, I think there's going to be a cap on how many you can have in a county, for example, and I'm not sure how they're going to arrive at that number. So just as some items to think about here, the effects of these 2 different operations, what that might have on illicit growing operations and street trade in Shelton, in the UGA, and Mason County. How much of a demand within Shelton and within our larger area is there for both of these really as a medical or a recreational use? There is a potential for attracting tourism. Some people might see this as a positive, some people may not. But certainly people coming here visiting from Oregon or Canada might be interested in buying something while they're passing through. Potential for added B&O tax and sales tax, that's a reality with any business that we try to attract, that there's always the ability, and the state provides that within their provisions. There's a number of taxes that are associated with a commercial operation, but the B&O tax and sales tax are ours to collect. And there's always going to be a need to regulate and enforce whatever regulations are imposed, and that will be ultimately in the city of Shelton our responsibility here. So with that, just wanted to discuss where your thoughts are and what you're thinking on both of these items, in particular the collective gardens, because of the pending moratorium. And if any questions about this, I'll try to field those as well.
Questions and comments?
How many moratoriums have we had? How many extensions now? We're up to like 2 years worth or something?
I believe the initial moratorium was established in March of 2011.
Right.
So, yeah, we've had 2 extensions to that initial moratorium.
I might add that, and I'm sure you're aware of it too, that the county has adopted an ordinance regulating collective gardens. And I've read their ordinance quite thoroughly, and it seems like that they've addressed all the questions that have come up with this. They're making a real clear definition by not allowing dispensaries, because it was never allowed to begin with by the state. So I for one would like to see the moratorium end, and I'm open for a few different interpretations of it, but I would like to see us come together with some sort of either an interim ordinance or something, but I'm not in favor of continuing a moratorium, is my personal feeling on it.
And I agree with that as well. I don't think the moratorium is doing us any good. We haven't, it hasn't really solved anything. And so I think it's time for it to go away, but in its place, we do need some kind of regulation. Until the state comes up with what their rules are going to be, and then the federal folks respond to that and decide what they're going to do, I'm not sure that anything that we do on a local level is going to make a whole lot of difference. I've said before that if it were up to me personally, I am not in favor of marijuana. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think we're heading down the right direction when we legalize it, because I just don't agree. But having said that, I also don't want to put the city in a position of being part of a lawsuit or having Shelton be named as somebody who is doing something wrong. So I have to, in this case, put my personal feelings aside and do what's best, I think, for the city. And at this point, I think that is dropping the moratorium and coming up with some kind of interim ordinance or something to that effect that will protect us against any lawsuits or things like that would come along.
How many cities do you know actually either are in moratorium? How many have just voted no and they're just not allowing collective gardens into them? Or how many is it that have adopted, cities, not counties, cities? Do you know that statistic? Do you know how many statewide have said yes? How many are still in moratorium?
I don't know specifically, and generally speaking, most cities are in a moratorium. There's information available through MSRC that's identified some cities that have passed regulations and what those look like. I think the city of Seattle and Everett are among those. So from a population standpoint, I think a fair amount of the state's represented in some sort of regulations, but city by city, I think those are the vast minority. I think most cities are in some sort of moratorium like Shelton is.
Mm-hmm. And if we were to extend the moratorium for an additional 6 months, would that take us past the next election cycle and the next legislative session? I would imagine I could figure that out, because we have September, October, November, December, January, and February. Would we not have a clearer picture from the state and maybe the feds on exactly how this is all kind of coming together?
An extension of the moratorium could last as long as an additional 6 months or into March of 2014. I'd be speculating if I told you that we'd have more direction from the feds. I think that's a pretty slow-moving train. We will have specific guidelines for the regulations for recreational marijuana use and what those look like. So from that standpoint, we would know what the state is doing. What they will not do is provide local zoning regulations with that. We looked at a map some months back that identified the locations that would be allowed with using those setback parameters, and it's a pretty small commercial zone where those activities could be allowed in Shelton now. If we wanted to add additional regulations on top of that, that would be our prerogative. In terms of collective gardens, I'm not sure if the legislature is going to tackle that or not, but that's mainly the one that's before us now. That's what our moratorium is based upon, is regulating the collective gardens.
Do people smoke inside of a collective garden? Do they smoke while they're there?
No, I believe that the intent wasn't to partake in that location. It was simply a place to have access to grow plants. And it was a specific number of plants for specific users and a single provider.
Because the reason I'm asking this is I know of a certain location, of a certain place that has plants legally, and that there's a fair amount of activity, and the odor sometimes is quite strong. And I was talking to our police chief about the odor issue, and it's kind of, they don't have a real, see, cities are a little different than counties, because if you're living on a dead-end street and there's no neighbors, then the odor thing doesn't kind of bother people too much. But odor, especially an odor that could have some, some benefits or unbenefits, like getting high, inside of neighborhoods, I think there's a problem with that. And I know the certain situation I'm talking about, there's a big problem with it.
Right.
there's a big problem with it. The other thing is that, and I don't know how much credibility NPR News has, but on NPR they had a story, I think it was last night or the night before, about higher crime rate to people wanting to break into these collective gardens and steal, I imagine, the drug or whatever. So, there's just, the list kind of goes on and on and on in my world. So I do have personal feelings, and I have to separate them when the feds and the states say, this is it. And, I'm sworn to obey the laws. But if we have a majority of cities in the state that are under moratorium, as we are, and there's another legislative session coming on down the line, and if I'm experiencing people with problems already under the current situation, I would have to say I would favor extending the moratorium, and that is my personal and my legal opinion at this time. So my advice would be to extend the moratorium, and I hope it all goes away. But it probably won't. But at this point, seeing as how there are many other cities still in the moratorium phase, I would say that we are not alone. And I don't think we can make decisions that are based totally on being afraid someone's going to sue us. I mean, that could happen, but guess what? They could sue us anyway for 1,000 other reasons. So my vote is to extend the moratorium at this time.
I guess the question would become, if all of this is going on while we're under moratorium, what good is the moratorium doing? And if we can create zoning that accomplishes the same thing, that's something that's permanent, not something that we have to come back every 6 months and renew. So wouldn't that be a better way to move?
That is, I think, what some cities have chosen as a tact. If you have provisions, example, for ventilating and eliminating the fumes that might impact your neighbors, you can enforce those, as opposed to the current regulations which don't address fumes at all. If you can meet the state requirements, supposedly you're in the right, and the city has no recourse unless they pass provisions that state otherwise. Another provision would be simply to pass licenses and have some sort of periodic inspection or some sort of mechanism to do a review of the activities. Again, I think the idea there was the collective gardens weren't intended to be a large-scale operation and to try to keep them at the scale that was intended.
I attended some of the public hearings as the county went through this, and there is a group of people out there that were ready to sue the county because it is a state ordinance that these collective gardens were allowed. And even MRSC has come out and stated that there are groups out there that will sue to get this done, and I think we could avoid a lawsuit if in fact they were to come to us. If we end this ordinance, but as Commissioner Pennell said, work on the zoning so that we can, in a sense, zone it to where it's not even going to happen. Similar to what the Liquor Control Board is proposing, 1,000 feet from schools, parks, daycare, all that stuff. We're narrowed down to a very small spot in the community that this can happen. So it's kind of a backdoor way to do it, but I think that it's better than just continually avoiding the subject and not dealing with it, because it's here, it's coming, it's only going to get more involved if we let it go another 6 months. The state's not going to step in and do anything. The feds have already come down and said that they will not go after the 502 initiative for recreational use, so best guess would be that they're not going to go after collective gardenings either. But at the same time, if we do an interim ordinance, we can revisit it in 3 months again. So I'm for moving along with this and ending the moratorium.
I know, Dave Leary, you came back in especially for this meeting. Did you have any other insight that Mr. Goins did not? I mean, I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on this exciting conversation.
Well, I don't have any insight. I think you just have to each make up your mind how you feel about this. I would suggest that you first decide whether you want to renew the moratorium or whether you want to end the moratorium. Then I would hope that you could provide us, staff, with some guidance as to what you'd want in its place. The moratorium doesn't have anything to do with the recreational, it has everything to do with the medical. It's going to take us some time to do that, so you may want to extend just for however much time it's going to take us to get the job done. But I think I think we also need some direction as to if not the moratorium, then what do we put in its place? So I mean, I'm counting 2 saying end it, but then the question is what do we do now? Because if we don't have any regulations in place, then you don't have any regulation at all at that point. Right now, the moratorium ostensibly says you can't have a collective garden. That's not working. So
So
what do you want in its place?
We have ordinances, similar ordinances, for other kinds of businesses that we need to regulate. Could we not just add marijuana to those?
Which one? I mean,
Like the sexually oriented business issue, we have things in place that say, you can't have certain kinds of businesses within 1,000 feet of schools, those kinds of things.
yeah. Curiously, the state will place, assuming that someone wants to set up a recreational marijuana retail outlet, or maybe another kind of outlet, the only place they can go is in the same place that we allow sexually oriented businesses. So that's possible. If you, what Steve's alternative says, that we'll do this for that you're trying to keep it small scale by putting it in a house. This would imply, and that's one way to view what the state law currently says on medical. The other is maybe to go in the way the county has, and you allow for the establishment of some kind of business where you have, instead of having one collective garden, you have a series of collective gardens that are all linked together. So, or you could do something else. So that's what we need time to sort out when we flesh out all the ideas. So.
That's one of the reasons that I'm in favor of ending this moratorium, because we've had 2 years to bring something forth and we haven't. On the moratorium, it just keeps getting kicked down the road. So I'm in favor of a temporary extension, as long as it's a 30-day or something, and not time enough to hammer out some regulations for it. But I'm not in favor of just ignoring it for another 6 months.
Let me share that one of the reasons that we've been kicking it down the road is because we have such poor guidance from the state and the national government. Nobody's telling us how to do this. It's just why you got so much variation from one city to another. So we have to make some decisions about how we're going to do it if you want to do it.
Yeah, well, this is not just kicking it down the road. We've been anticipating guidance from federal and state, and just last week, our governor, I saw on TV saying there is still a lot of confusion about this, and especially on medical marijuana, separate situation, that the feds are still busting those places in this state. There's still a lot, and I have to say also, is I got voted in, just as my fellow commissioners did, to represent the people in this city. And I'll be honest with you, I would have to say far majority of the citizens in this city are not really in favor with a lot more young people smoking marijuana, okay? So I'm just going to throw that up, and I'm just going to say that I wish that this could kind of stop. I grew up in the 60s, and I could not see it as, what do you call, if you put in the groups of the most productive members of society, it just dumbs you down, So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't like it, and I think the people in the city would like to resist this, and if the state said this is what you have to do, or if only one little city in the world said we're holding out against it, but seeing as how we are in the majority by being in a moratorium, then I don't have any problem with continuing in that stance. maybe this next legislative session we'll have more insight, or we do or we don't do. But I personally would extend this moratorium for 6 months.
A couple of points. I saw that same report, and the state is only busting dispensaries. They've not going after collective gardens. And also, the last election, Mason County and every precinct was in the majority to support I-502. So I don't agree that the majority of citizens are against this. I think that the majority of citizens actually voted for it. So just to clarify that. And
The ones that voted, right? Well, that's my opinion. Can't change it now.
Again, a moratorium isn't solving anything, and I don't think it ever will. So why not bite the bullet and come up with a zoning regulation that makes sense and have something that we can enforce? You can't enforce a moratorium, so I don't think that it's the best choice to deal with this issue. And we're probably always going to be in a situation of not having the answers. You know, this debate is going to be going on for years. So why not get ourselves out of this merry-go-round and just put something in place that we can defend?
Well, if we have a motion, I have no problem in voting. So, and if we have a motion, then are we going to end it now, or are we going to end it a month from now after we've gotten some sort of our own internal rules together? I mean, that's why Mr. O'Leary came back from his work day to talk to us about, then, if we're going to do this, if this is what the commission's decided, then are we ready to end that now, or do we need a 30-day hold and then come back with I mean, that's really where we need some guidance here on that.
If you take no action, it will end. It'll end in 9 days.
But we have
8 days, whatever.
We don't have no real zoning, or we haven't 100% all set up for what happens at that moment.
Yeah,
So
and
if someone applies for a license the next day,
if you want to put something in place that regulates marijuana collective gardens, and then before the moratorium expires, then you should extend for not 6 months, but for a shorter period of time. Enough time, and we'll just have to figure out what it is you'd like to do, and then we can talk about how long to extend it at the end of the discussion. I would suggest, based on what I'm hearing you say, that the next item of discussion is, what do you want? Steve has given, you've got a couple options at this point. Those certainly isn't the universe of alternatives, but Steve has said one alternative. Well, the alternative that you can see that the county did, that Mike brought up, which is really makes a collective garden into a business, or you can say, well, that isn't, what we want to do is we want to keep it small scale in houses. Either way you go, then what we'll need to do is hear your concerns with either one of those two alternatives, and then we'll need to analyze them and come back with with what alternatives are that we can sort out, and then we'll have more discussion.
Okay, so would a proper motion be that we agree to extend the moratorium for 30 days, and we are expecting to replace it with some policy that then will, address our concerns? Is that?
Yeah, and if you're going to do that, I think you'd be better served to wait until you figure out what your alternatives are, but you could certainly do that the other way around too. So you could extend for 30 days, or you could, but at some point you're going to have to tell us which model you want to pursue, of which kind of business, because that's going to affect how we set up the zoning.
And you did say you needed probably 30 days. We do need to extend it at least for 30 days, because it's going to expire sooner than 30 days. Is that correct?
If I can interject here,
I believe an option that might be good in this situation is to adopt an ordinance at your next meeting, which will be in advance of the moratorium expiring, extending the moratorium, and you could choose to extend the moratorium for an additional 6 months or another time period that you're more comfortable with. Staff could also bring back draft regulations that you could discuss and talk about. But in the meantime, you've extended the moratorium, but you can see you're working toward a solution. You know what the county's passed, or you can certainly get familiar with that quickly. We could provide you an example of how a collective garden could be regulated in a residential setting and have you contemplate that and have some time to deal with that as well.
Yeah, we do have one more meeting before the moratorium expires, so.
Hey, push it off. And what we'll do is we'll kick the can down the road.
I do believe in the regulations that you adopt will take 30 days to become effective as well.
You could pass interim regulations
That would be immediate.
that would not necessarily need to meet those criteria. And generally speaking, you want a little time to have public comment and others before you pass permanent regulations, which this would allow you to do as well.
So we're okay, you get enough direction from us? I would like to see, I'd like to see the residential proposal and for a general city, you know, a more of an industrially zoned thing is what I would like to consider.
I think I've got sufficient direction to provide you some options tonight.
And I will also add that if you're going this route, if the city's gonna press forward here, and if we're having, this is where they sell, they don't smoke. Is that they just sell the product?
Not necessarily
They don't even sell it, they grow it.
They grow it there. Okay, they grow it there, and they sell it there, don't
No,
they?
no.
Just grow it. Okay, well, because
The providers have a limit to the individuals they're serving. These are qualified patients, and each provider, if you will, only has one patient at a time, and it's not real clear how that's regulated, but they're not finding patients and selling product. They have a specific patient they're trying to meet their needs, and that was, again, the intent of being small scale here, was to have a few individuals setting up a small garden.
okay, and at the moment, that could be in a commercial zone.
Steve, you want to?
Again, you could create regulations that treat it like a business operation, much like the county has done. I think their tact was to address some of the safety concerns. If everyone knows where the collective garden is, there might be people trying to break in, steal product, that type of thing. So they really made provisions that would help to keep it a safe place, part of their regulations. I think the other tact is if you're allowing this in someone's home, you're not supposed to even know it's there, and you wouldn't be able to tell just by driving by, or just even if you live around the corner, that there's a small collective garden in that facility. You don't have a lot of traffic. It's that type of thing. So it's there's two different ways of approaching it.
Just for general public knowledge, I can guarantee you, if you have 12 active plants in a room and you have a fan blowing outside, you don't keep it a secret, and it is obnoxious, and it is not pleasant. And I think if you're going to do it, you don't allow them inside of neighborhoods where little children are running around. So that's my comment. I would think if we're going to go forward with this, then we put those gardens in some semi-commercially zoned place, and you don't have a lot of neighbors with windows 12 feet from a window with a fan blowing directly across. They're not even smoking it at that time. That's just the odor from the plants. They do give off an odor. Fair enough? Okay. So I think we have enough, don't we, for you to go forward to your desk and prepare.
I'll be back next week.
All right. Great discussion. Thank you very much. There's no new business at this time. Administration report.
Well, I don't have anything for you this week, Your Honor.
All right.
Since I'm not at work.
Yeah, you're not at work, right. We do have a general public comment. If anybody would like to say something, there's a second opportunity, and you just sign name and address here. If you want to come in, actually, Mr. Davis, you already signed up for the first round, so come on up and share with us there.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tom Davis. As one who attends all the county meetings, every single one for 3 years, this is like deja vu watching this go through again. I just wanted to add, for what it's worth, that many of the conversations that are taking place here took place in the county, and there was, the city is different, of course, as you say, the density is different, and so on, the proximity to each other. But in the end, what happened is when they did set aside the moratorium, nothing happened. There was nothing. There wasn't any explosion of anything. It just rang hollow. But what they did realize, and what a lot of people had pushed for, was that you can't have a moratorium and regulate at the same time. So you had no say in it, and that was my problem. Because I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. If you can't make it disappear, I can't make it disappear. So it's here. So now that's what we have to deal with. But if you don't regulate it, then you have no control, and if you have no control, then all the common sense regulations that we would apply just go out the window. So this is between a rock and a hard place. I hope you learned from the city. The city came up with some pretty comprehensive and stringent measures that these places must comply with, and I think there's a lot to be learned from mining that data. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, administration final touches.
Touches? Mike?
I got one touch and one maybe touch. Working on a couple amendments for the parametrics contract. One, to finish up all the design on the elements we were talking about over the last several weeks. A second one, to provide some field support for the Fairmont project. The potential touch, we won't know more for a couple days. The funding we applied for the water system improvements that disappeared through the trust fund, those projects have been transferred over to Department of Health through a different funding mechanism. The applications for those just came out today. We're looking into what those applications look like, what the conditions of that funding are going to be, and depending on the need for signature, maybe bringing that back to the commission in 2 weeks to authorize the mayor or commissioners, if necessary, to sign an application to look at pursuing that. Preliminarily, it looks like pretty beneficial funding for those water system projects that we need. So,
all right. Yes.
Other touches? Just one more thing. I think that this UGA MOU, that may be ripe for a briefing next week. I'm not sure. There's some things that are coming together this week, and I am going to attend one other meeting, and I'll be able to come in and change that around if we get the chance to do it. Basically, the work's done. We just need to get the last bits of it, and I can get that done this week too. So that's it. That's it, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Our next meeting will be Monday, September 9th, 2013 at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.